They called him the cursed cowboy, a man so dangerous no one dared touch him. They said silver scars moved beneath his gloves like living things. They said lightning itself obeyed his command. And they said any woman foolish enough to marry him was signing her own death warrant. Clara Whitmore had nothing left to lose. Her father's debts had taken everything: her home, her reputation, her future. So when she saw that marriage notice promising a new life with no questions asked, she didn't run away. She rode straight toward the monster. But here's what the gossips didn't know. Sometimes the most dangerous-looking man is the one who's been hurt the most. And sometimes the woman everyone pities is the only one brave enough to see the truth. What Clara discovered on that isolated ranch would change everything she believed about curses, about love, and about what it really means to save someone. This story proves that what the world calls a curse might just be a gift waiting for the right person to understand it. It's about a woman who refused to let fear write her future, and a man who learned that being different doesn't mean being broken. The real message here: we all carry invisible marks, scars from our past, secrets we hide, parts of ourselves we think make us unlovable. But the right person won't run from your storms. They'll stand beside you and help you find peace. If you believe that love can heal what the world calls hopeless, you're in the right place. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever been judged for something that wasn't your fault? Hit that like button if you're ready for this journey, and subscribe so you never miss a story about women who refuse to give up. Now, let's begin. Now, the August heat was a heavy blanket over town. Clara stood at the general store, staring at the ad she knew by heart. It promised a new life with no questions asked. Around her, the townfolk treated her like a ghost. Just a month ago, she was the banker's daughter. Now, with her father's debt swallowing everything, she was the town disgrace. Still looking at that devil's notice, I see. The voice belonged to Mrs. Walsh, the minister's wife. I'm considering it, Clara said, not turning around. The older woman scoffed. Child, that ain't an option. It's a tombstone. Ethan Crow is more wolf than man. Clara finally faced her. Then maybe we're a good match. This town sure seems to think I belong in the wild. Mrs. Walsh's face tightened. Your father's mistakes are not your own. No, ma'am, Clara replied, her voice steady. But his mistakes left me with nothing. I appreciate the church's charity, but I won't be a burden. Mrs. Walsh leaned in, her voice a hiss. You don't know what he is. They say he's got silver scars under those gloves that move like living things. Clara had heard all the tall tales. She'd weighed the whispers against the cold, hard fact of her own empty pockets. Stories, Clara said quietly. This town told stories about my father being a good man, too. I've learned what people say and what's true are two different trails. The older woman's pity turned to stone. Then you're a fool, and whatever happens to you is on your own head. Clara watched her leave. Judgment was heavy, but starvation was heavier. At the livery, she found old Tom Preston. He'd been a friend to her father before the trouble. Mr. Preston, I need to hire a horse. Tom leaned on his pitchfork. This is about that notice, ain't it? Yes, sir. He sighed, shaking his head. Keep your money, Miss Clara. You can borrow Sweet Molly, but you listen close. I knew Ethan before the war. He ain't a bad man, but he ain't safe neither. He put that notice up because he needs someone desperate enough not to ask a bunch of questions. Is that what I am? Clara asked. I'm someone with no other choice. He gave her a long look, then nodded. I reckon your daddy would tan my hide for this. My daddy left me to fend for myself, Clara said. I've earned the right to make my own way. 20 minutes later, she was riding out on the gentle mare, Sweet Molly. In her old bag, she carried her few dresses and a small picture of her parents. The familiar farms soon gave way to wilder country. After 2 hours, she saw it down in a hollow, Crow Ranch. She had expected a dark, broken-down place. Instead, she saw a sturdy cabin, a clean barn, and healthy horses in the corral. This was a place someone cared for. As she rode into the yard, the cabin door opened. A tall man stepped out, wearing a long duster despite the heat. His face was shadowed by his hat, but the first thing she saw were the heavy leather gloves on his hands. He stood perfectly still on the porch, watching her ride closer. She stopped the horse about 10 feet away, her heart pounding. The place felt miles from anywhere. "Mr. Crow?" Her voice was shaky but clear. "My name is Clara Whitmore. I came about your notice." He was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough. "You read the whole thing?" "Yes, sir." "The part about no questions?" "Yes, sir." He paused again. "And you still came out here all by yourself?" "I did," Clara said, sitting up straighter in the saddle. "All right," he said slowly. "Get down from the horse." His face was weathered by sun and wind, with a scar slicing through his left eyebrow. He watched her with storm-gray eyes that made her feel seen right down to the bone. "You sure you know what you're signing up for?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "This ain't about romance. I need a woman to run the house and the books while I run the ranch." He paused. "I keep to myself and I don't abide meddling." Clara met his gaze. "The notice said no questions about the past. I can honor that." His eyes narrowed. "Most women can't let a mystery lie." "Mr. Crow," she said plainly, "I'm not looking for a mystery. I need a safe place to land. My father's debts took everything, and I won't be shamed into marrying a 60-year-old man who thinks I should be grateful." A muscle jumped in his jaw. "Mackie." It wasn't a question. He studied her for a long moment. "You're just a girl." "I'm 22. You look frail." She lifted her chin. "I am stronger than I look." "You'd have to be," he said, turning to look out at the vast empty land. "This life is hard. The town folk think I'm cursed. My name will become your reputation, you understand?" "I do," she said softly. "They already whisper about me. At least here I'll have a proper roof and honest work." He turned back and a flicker of respect showed in his eyes. "All right then, Miss Whitmore. We'll ride to town tomorrow and make it legal. You'll have your own room. My word is my bond. I won't lay a hand on you." Thinking the deal was sealed, Clara offered her hand. He flinched back like she'd offered him a hot iron. "Don't," he said, his voice suddenly sharp as cracked ice. "Don't ever reach for me. That rule is not up for discussion." Clara snatched her hand back, her heart hammering. "I'm sorry, "I know," he cut in, the edge leaving his voice. "But that's the most important rule. You keep to your space, I'll keep to mine. We clear on that?" "Crystal clear." He gave a single, sharp nod. "Get your bag. I'll show you the cabin." The inside of the cabin was a surprise. It was simple but spotless, with a big stone fireplace and solid, well-made furniture. "That room's yours," Ethan said, pointing to a door. "I'm on the right. Pantry's stocked. Just make a list if you need something from town." Clara set her bag down. "It's a good, clean home." He moved toward the kitchen, keeping his distance. "Can you cook?" "Yes, my mother taught me well. I can handle ranch cooking." "Good," he said, almost sounding relieved. "I eat before dawn and after sundown. The days are yours. I don't need help with the cattle. I need someone to manage this place, to handle the accounts and deal with buyers." "Can you do that?" Clara nodded. "I kept my father's books. I know my way around numbers." "Then this might just work," he said, heading for the door. "I'll sleep in the barn tonight. Give you some time to settle. We'll head to town at first light." "Mr. Crow," she called out, stopping him. "Thank you for this chance." His shoulders went rigid. "Don't thank me yet, Miss Whitmore. You have no idea what you've just walked into." Then he was gone, leaving Clara alone in her new home. She watched from the window as he crossed the yard to the barn, his posture stiff and controlled. Whatever secrets he was hiding, they were now part of her life, a life she had promised not to question. She had traded the devil she knew for one she did not. But this new life came with sturdy walls, and a man who, for all his strangeness, had offered her a measure of respect. That night, lying in a real bed under a heavy quilt, she listened to the wind and the distant lowing of cattle. She thought she could hear him, moving restlessly in the barn, a man as sleepless as she was. Tomorrow she would be Clara Crow, wife to a man she barely knew, a partner to a mystery she had sworn to ignore. She thought about all the grim warnings from town, about the cursed rancher who never took off his gloves. But then she thought of the well-kept home and the careful way he had stepped back from her touch. It was not anger she had seen in his eyes, but something closer to fear. Not fear of her, she reckoned, but fear of hurting her. Whatever haunted Ethan Crow, it felt more like loneliness than evil. Pulling the quilt tighter, she allowed herself a sliver of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had both found a way to be a little less alone in the world. She had to become his wife today. Clara put on her only good dress, a simple blue cotton that had outlasted her father's debts. In the main room, Ethan was already waiting, still wearing his heavy coat and gloves despite the cabin's warmth. He said the judge kept early hours, so they needed to leave soon. He had cleaned up some, his hair combed and beard trimmed. As they started the silent ride to town, she tried to memorize the landmarks on the path to her new life. The town of Redemption went quiet when they rode down Main Street. Folks stopped talking just to stare, but Ethan paid them no mind. Inside the courthouse, he told her to stay near and not speak to anyone. Judge Morrison, a lean man in his 50s with assessing eyes, was expecting them. He looked from Ethan to Clara, recognizing her. He had known her father and wanted to be certain she was entering this marriage by her own free will. Clara assured the judge she was there by choice. The whole ceremony took maybe 5 minutes, just some legal words and 2 signatures in a book. When the judge asked for a witness, the door opened. Tom Preston stepped inside, hat in hand, and offered to sign. Clara was deeply grateful for the old man's kindness. After Tom signed, Judge Morrison stamped the document with a loud thud and gave Ethan the standard advice on how to treat a wife. A flicker of anger showed in Ethan's eyes as he said he did not need advice on respect. Standing on the courthouse steps, she was now Mrs. Ethan Crow. Clara mentioned she needed supplies. Ethan said he would wait outside with the horses, protecting them both from the whispers that would follow them through the stores. She had to face the town's cold shoulders all by herself. Holding her head high, Clara quickly bought her things, including some fabric to make curtains. She found Ethan right where she left him, a silent guardian no one dared approach. On the ride home, Ethan finally broke the long silence. He told her she handled herself well back there. Clara admitted she had practice being stared at because of her father's scandal. When she told him about the curtain fabric, he said the place was her home now, and she could do what she wanted with it. As the town faded behind them, Clara felt a wave of relief. Out here, they were just 2 people making their way home. The first weeks of their marriage settled into a quiet pattern. Ethan was gone before sunrise and worked until after dark, a man of few words and long hours. Clara slowly turned the bare cabin into a real home, putting up curtains and adding small comforts. She learned he liked his coffee black and his meals simple. She also learned about the invisible lines he drew around himself, a space she knew not to cross. He never ever removed his coat or his leather gloves, not even to eat. He slept in his own room behind a closed door. The one time she stumbled on the porch, he instinctively reached to steady her, then snatched his hand back as if he had touched a hot stove. In that instant, she saw something in his eyes. It was not anger or disgust. It was a deep and painful fear. The town whispered that he was cursed. Clara finally understood he was afraid of his own touch. One night at dinner, Ethan broke their usual quiet. "You've done well with the place," he said, looking at his plate. "It feels like a home now." "Thank you," Clara replied. "I'm glad you're pleased." He finally met her eyes for a brief moment. I know this ain't the life you would have chosen, but you've made the best of it. Clara put her fork down. Ethan, I chose this, with my eyes wide open. You've been fair, just like you promised. You've given me respect. That's more than most women get. He was completely still. You deserve better. Maybe, she said, her voice soft but firm. But this is what I have, and it's an honest life. After my father's lies, honesty is what I value most. Ethan's jaw tightened, as if he were holding back a flood of words. You're a good woman, Clara, he finally managed to say. Better than I deserve. And you need to stop talking like that, she chided gently. As if you are not worthy of simple decency. Maybe I'm not. The town calls you cursed, Ethan. Dangerous. But I have been here a month, and the only danger I see is how you work yourself to the bone. You do not understand what I am capable of. You are right, I do not. But I know what you choose to be. You choose to be a fair man, a good man. That choice matters more than any curse. He stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. I need to check the barn. Clara watched him go, his shoulders stiff with a weight she could not see. She had pushed him, but she saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. As autumn settled in, Clara found her rhythm on the ranch, baking bread at dawn and tending her small garden. Their talks were short, just business. But Ethan started to change. He would linger after dinner with his coffee, asking her opinion on ranch supplies. It was slow progress, but it was something. One Thursday, she saw 3 riders coming. Her stomach tightened. Visitors usually meant trouble. Ethan came out of the barn, instantly on alert, and walked out to meet them. The man in the lead was Sheriff Dalton. His 2 deputies looked like they were expecting a fight. Dalton stopped his horse about 20 feet away. "Crow!" he called out. His eyes glanced at Clara, then back to Ethan. "Need a word, then say it and go. I am busy." Dalton swung down from his horse. "Tom Morrison is missing some cattle. He claims the tracks lead this way." Ethan stood perfectly still, but Clara could feel his anger. "Morrison's land is 5 miles south, a lot of ground between his fence and mine." "That is what I told him," Dalton said. "But he insisted I come look. Do you mind if we check your herd?" "I do mind," Ethan said, his words like ice. "But you will do it anyway, so go on. You will not find what you are looking for." Dalton looked uneasy. "We will be quick about it." The sheriff and his men spent an hour checking the cattle. When Dalton returned, his face was blank. "We found no Morrison cattle. Your numbers are right. I told you." Dalton nodded. "Look, Crow, I have no problem with you. But a man with your reputation always gets the blame. Fair or not. Fair has not applied to me for a long time." The sheriff tipped his hat to Clara. "Sorry for the trouble, Mrs. Crow." After they left, Ethan stared at the trail of dust. "Does that happen often?" Clara asked. "Often enough," he said, his voice rough. "Anything goes wrong for 20 miles, and it is the cursed cowboy's fault. Now you see what you married into." "They believe I am dangerous, Clara," Ethan said quietly. "When something goes wrong, it is my fault. The truth does not matter once people have decided what to believe." Clara stepped forward, her chin high. "They searched and found nothing because there was nothing to find. That is the only truth that matters. I do not worry about the opinions of fools." He studied her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "You have more courage than you show." He turned away. "I need to check the fence line. I will go by myself." She felt a deep ache for the loneliness he wore like armor. Clara kept his dinner warm on the stove, and a cold worry grew as the house fell into darkness. He finally walked in close to midnight. She was waiting for him at the table. "You should be asleep," he said, stopping suddenly at the sight of her. "I saved you a plate," she replied, choosing to ignore his command. "Did you find any trouble?" He sank into a chair, not bothering to take off his hat or his gloves. "3 of Morrison's cattle. They broke through his fence. I drove them back and repaired the wire." "That only proves you are an honest man," Clara insisted. "I will make sure to tell Tom Preston the next time I'm in town." He will see that the true story gets around. Ethan looked down at his meal, his voice low when he spoke. This place feels different with you here. It feels like a home worth returning to. The confession was a heavy, warm thing in the quiet air between them. Weeks later, the first bitter cold of winter arrived. Clara woke to see beautiful frost patterns on the glass and quickly built up the fire. Ethan came into the main room, moving like each step caused him great pain. His face was a tight mask. "Are you all right?" she asked him gently. "I am fine," he said, and his voice was sharp. He left without another word to check on the livestock. A terrible feeling washed over Clara. The weather grew worse as the day went on, bringing a fierce wind and the first flakes of snow. Ethan came inside only for a moment at midday, his face looking grim. He barely ate. "A bad storm is on its way," he announced, staring at the flames. "Is there any way I can help?" Clara asked. "No," he answered. And for a second she saw true panic in his eyes. "You must stay inside, keep the fire going. If I'm not back by dark, do not come looking for me. Promise me this." His intensity was frightening. "I promise," she whispered. He was gone a moment later, disappearing into the blowing snow. The storm became a monster. The sky turned a strange color of green, and then thunder began to rumble. A winter thunderstorm, the kind old-timers talked about with fear. The hours passed slowly. 10 o'clock, then 11. As midnight approached, she knew she could not wait any longer. A promise did not matter if he was out there dying. She put on her warmest clothes, lit a lantern, and stepped out into the blizzard. The wind pushed her back, but she held tight to the guide rope Ethan had strung to the barn. His horse was gone. He was still somewhere out in the storm, most likely in the north pasture with the herd. As she reached for a saddle, a strange humming sound filled the air. A powerful bolt of lightning struck nearby, turning the entire yard white for a second. In that bright flash, she saw Ethan. He was stumbling before he fell to his knees in the deep snow. "Ethan!" she cried, running out to him. His whole body was shaking. "You were supposed to stay inside," he gasped. His face was twisted in agony. She reached for his arm to pull him up, and in that instant, the world changed. The humming became a deafening roar. A strange blue light erupted from Ethan himself, pouring through his coat and gloves. Every instinct screamed for her to run, but she saw the pure terror in his eyes and held on even tighter. "I have you," she promised. "You do not understand," he choked out. "Get away from me before I—" Lightning struck right beside them. It was so close Clara felt the heat, but the electricity did not touch them. It curved and flowed directly into Ethan's body. The silver marks beneath his clothes blazed like fire. "Please," he begged, tears freezing on his face. "I cannot control it. I will hurt you. You are not hurting me." Clara moved closer, wrapping her arms around him while the storm raged. "I am right here." Lightning hit again and again, drawn to Ethan. But where she held him, the violent energy seemed to calm and find peace. The storm slowly faded. "How?" he whispered. "How are you not dead?" "I do not know," Clara admitted, feeling a strange pulse under his coat. She helped him to his feet, and they stumbled back to the cabin. Once inside, Ethan collapsed into a chair by the fire. A faint silvery light still pulsed through the seams of his coat and gloves. "So," she said, her voice shaking just a little, "I am guessing this is the curse you could not talk about." Ethan looked up, his face filled with shame and fear. "You should have stayed inside. You saw what I am." "I saw that you were in pain," she replied, pulling a chair close to his. "I saw lightning being drawn to you. And I saw that you are not going through it alone anymore." "All I saw was the man I married, not some monster. He told me he was cursed, changed by something that happened during a border conflict 10 years ago. His unit was ordered to search some old sacred ruins. They walked in on a strange ritual, and that's when everything went wrong. The men there captured his squad. They held Ethan down, carving glowing patterns into his skin with liquid silver. The pain made him pass out. When he woke up, a freak lightning storm had killed his entire squad. He was the only one left. He believed he did it, but I told him plain. You were tortured. What happened after was not your choice. The army simply covered it all up and listed him as dead. So he came out here to this remote place, trying to ensure he could never hurt anyone again. But then he remembered the storm, how I had touched him and was not harmed. My touch had actually stopped his pain. I suggested that maybe the marks were not a curse at all. Maybe they just needed a connection to the earth, a way to ground the energy. He had to admit we were already living an impossible life. He asked what I would do now that I knew the truth. He expected me to run and even offered me money to get somewhere safe. But I was not going anywhere. I looked him in the eye and said, I made vows, Ethan, for better or for worse. This is my home and you are my husband. We will face this together. He had trusted me with the truth, and I would not abandon him. Clara woke up to a world buried in quiet snow. Last night felt like a fever dream, but the man in her kitchen was all too real. Ethan was already at the stove, wearing his usual armor of a coat and gloves. The vulnerable man from the storm locked away tight. Morning, he said, his voice flat. Coffee's ready. He poured 2 cups, his hands steady as a stone. Storm's passed. I need to go check on the cattle. She took the mug he offered, careful their fingers did not touch. Ethan, about what happened? We do not have to talk about it. He turned to stare out the window. You saw what I am, that is all. I saw you were in pain, she said, her voice soft but sure. And I saw it stop the second I touched you. I think that is worth talking about. He was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. For 10 years, anyone who touched me during a storm was risking their life. The power in me should have killed you instantly. He turned around, and she saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. But it did not. It was like you grounded it. Have you ever let anyone else try to help? She asked. Of course not, he snapped back. I will not risk an innocent life. So you have just suffered alone for 10 years, thinking you were too dangerous, she said, stepping closer. What if you were wrong? Last night was a fluke, he insisted. Next time you might not be so lucky. I am not afraid of you, Ethan, and I do not need you to protect me. I need a partner who trusts me to stand beside him. The challenge hung in the air. He studied her face, but she did not look away. A small smile touched his lips. You are stubborn as a mule. He grabbed his hat from the table. I have to check the stock. I am coming with you, she said before he could say no. It is my land, too. He let out a long breath. Fine, but you stay close. They saddled their horses in silence and rode out into a world made new by the snow. The air was clean and cold, the sky a brilliant blue. Out on the land, Ethan was a different person. He moved with a quiet confidence, spotting a broken fence post or a half-hidden calf with an expert's eye. This was his world, a place with problems he knew how to fix. Found 3 head down in the South Ravine, he called out. They are alive, but they will need hay until this snow melts. They worked side by side for the rest of the morning, falling into an easy rhythm. She was frozen and sore by the time they got back, but she felt like she had earned his respect. You did good work, he said as they took care of the horses. Better than I expected from a town girl. My mother grew up on a farm, she said with a hint of pride. Back in the cabin after they ate, he surprised her by staying at the table. He just sat there holding his coffee cup in his gloved hands. Last night, he started, you asked questions. You deserve some answers, he said quietly. These marks on my skin, they pull the lightning right out of the sky and into my body. If it builds up too much, it has to go somewhere. If someone touches me, his voice dropped to a whisper, they become the path to the ground. I have killed a man that way, Clara. A doctor who just touched my arm during a storm. His heart stopped. He finally met her gaze, his eyes full of old pain. Last night, when you grabbed me, I thought I had killed you too. But you did not, she said. And I do not know why, he admitted, the confusion plain in his voice. The power inside me last night could have killed a dozen men, but you just absorbed it. I do not have the words for it, Ethan, she replied. I only know that when I held on to you, your suffering stopped. That is what terrifies me, he confessed. You helped me, which means next time I am going to need you there. What if last night was a fluke? I will not risk your life. That is not your choice to make, Clara said, leaning forward. It is my choice, and I am willing to take that risk. Why? The word tore out of him, raw and desperate. Model. Have you ever seen someone judged for something they can't control? That was Ethan's life, day in and day out, all because of a curse he never asked for. But his new wife, Clara, saw something more, and she was about to risk it all to defend the good man she knew was underneath. This story shows that what folks say about a person isn't always the truth. So stay with me to see what happens when one woman's courage takes a stand. After he risked his life for her, Clara had to ask, why? We've only been married 3 months and I've barely let you get close. Why do I matter so much to you? She answered her own question when he stayed silent. Because everyone deserves to have someone in their corner. When I look at you, I don't see a monster. I see a good man carrying a heavy burden. Ethan's jaw was tight. That kind of thinking will get you killed. Clara met his gaze. Or it might just save you. He looked down at his gloved hands, then turned away. I need to get back to work. He was retreating, and she knew it. But in the days that followed, a cautious trust began to grow between them. They were building a partnership, slow and steady. 2 weeks later, Clara was in town for supplies when she heard a voice boom across the general store. It was Big Tom Morrison, stirring up trouble. It's just suspicious, is all I'm saying, Tom announced to the small crowd. Cattle disappearing, strange lights during that big storm, and Ethan Crow just sitting on his ranch. The sheriff checked, Mrs. Mackey offered weakly. This time, Tom shot back. His eyes landed on Clara. And what kind of woman marries a man like that? She's either desperate or in on his devilry. Every eye in the store turned to Clara, their faces a mixture of fear and suspicion. She felt her spine straighten. The kind of woman who values honesty over gossip, Clara said, her voice clear and steady. I know my husband, and he's a good man. If your cattle are missing, Mr. Morrison, perhaps you should look to your own fences instead of blaming a man who has never done you any harm. Tom sputtered. Everyone knows what he is. Clara's chin lifted. You know stories. I know the man. She paid for her things in a tense silence and walked out with her head held high, though her hands trembled as she loaded the wagon. When she got back, Ethan knew right away something was wrong. What happened? He asked. I had a talk with Tom Morrison, she said. I told him he was mistaken about you. Ethan's face went hard. Clara, you can't get in the middle of this. You shouldn't make enemies in town for my sake. She stepped closer, right into his space. No, I have to live with you. When they speak against you, they speak against me. We are in this together. You deserve better than this, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't want a normal life, she whispered, laying her hand on his arm. I want this. He looked at her hand, and then slowly he covered it with his own gloved one. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, he said quietly, or the most foolish. Maybe I can be both, she replied. For the first time, he gave her a real small smile. That night, the cabin felt less like a shared space, and more like a home. They were building something real. But the next morning, trouble came riding in. Clara saw 4 riders approaching, moving fast. They weren't locals. Their clothes were too fine, and they rode with a hard purpose. Ethan came out of the barn, his whole body on alert. The lead rider, a man in a long coat, dismounted. Clara saw the badge on his coat, and her blood ran cold. He was a federal marshal. Ethan Crow, the marshal said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "What business do you have on my land?" Ethan asked, his tone flat. The marshal pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I think you know. I have a warrant for your arrest, for the deaths of 12 soldiers during the border conflicts." Then the past arrived on our doorstep. 4 federal marshals carrying a warrant from 10 years ago. It accused him of desertion and using unnatural weapons. The lead marshal said Ethan could come peacefully or the hard way. I stepped forward before he could answer. I introduced myself as his wife, Clara Crow, and said that a 10-year-old warrant was not legal grounds to arrest a man on his own property. Ethan found his strength then. He stood tall and told them they were trespassing. One of the marshals pointed out that there were 4 of them against just 1 of him. I corrected him quickly. "That makes 2 of us, and this is our land." I dared them to start a fight over a questionable warrant, promising the territorial governor would hear about it. If they wanted him, they had to follow the law and send a proper summons. They had clearly expected an easy arrest, not a rancher's wife who knew the law. The lead marshal finally backed his men down, promising a court summons would be coming. After they rode away, Ethan stared at me in disbelief. He said, "You made 4 federal marshals back down with nothing but words." I asked what he would do when the summons finally came. He looked at the life he had built and said with resolve, "I am going to face it." "Let them charge me," he said, finally looking right at her. "I will stand trial. I am tired of running, Clara. Tired of living in fear of who I am." She came down from the porch to stand with him. "Then we will face it together." He looked down at her, the walls he had built starting to crack. "You keep saying that." She reached out and took his gloved hand. "For better or worse. And I am not going anywhere, Ethan." His fingers tightened, and through the leather she felt warmth. "I do not deserve you," he whispered, his voice full of wonder. "Stop deciding what you deserve," she said gently. "You have a stubborn wife, a home, and a life worth fighting for." She squeezed his hand. "Now, I have bread that needs baking, and you have cattle to see to. We can worry about marshals later." As they walked back to the cabin, a true team, they knew they could handle whatever storm was coming. The official summons arrived 3 weeks later, brought by a nervous young man who left in a hurry. Ethan stood in the yard and read the document, his face like stone. "The trial is set for January 15th in Austin," he said, his voice empty. "They are charging me with 12 counts of manslaughter and desertion." Clara took the paper. "This is wrong. You were tortured. What happened was not your fault." He just stared out the window. "They will see the marks. They will hear about the lightning. They will decide I am too dangerous to be free." She stood beside him. "It is time you stopped taking the blame for what others did to you. And what if the jury decides to hang me?" The thought sent a chill through her bones. "Then we will make certain they see the truth," she said firmly. "We will find proof." He shook his head. "The army erased my records. Anyone who knew is dead or gone." She turned to face him. "The men who carved those marks into you cannot all be ghosts. People like that leave tracks." For the first time, he looked at her with something like hope. "I will not stand by while they punish you for another man's crime." Clara spent her days digging through records at the small territorial library. The librarian, Miss Sarah Chen, was a sharp woman who offered quiet help. One afternoon, Sarah spoke in a low voice. "I have heard stories like this before. Men who came back from the border conflicts, changed, marked. Most of them died within a few years." She looked right at Clara. "Whatever you are trying to prove, be careful. People who ask too many questions about those operations tend to have accidents." That warning only confirmed Clara's suspicions. That night, she spread her findings on the kitchen table. "Your unit was at Fort Blanco in August of 1865, correct?" Ethan nodded. "That same month," she continued, "the fort received unusual shipments. Not normal medical supplies, but things for a laboratory. Ethan leaned forward, studying her notes. I remember the doctor there, a strange man. He was always working on something secret. We were not allowed near his building. And 3 weeks before your last patrol, Clara said, a Colonel Marcus Webb inspected the fort. She held up another document. 6 months after your incident, Webb was quietly court-martialed for unauthorized experiments. The charges were dropped. Ethan's face went pale. He was behind it. He began to pace the small room. If this goes all the way up the chain of command, they will bury me to protect their secrets. Clara gathered her papers with resolve. Not if we expose those secrets first. We have to find Colonel Webb and make him testify. Webb won't ever talk, Ethan said. He'd be admitting to war crimes. Clara nodded. Maybe, but if we find other men marked like you, it might be enough. We have 6 weeks, Ethan. Are you ready to fight? He was quiet for a long moment, a battle raging inside him. I have been running for 10 years, he said at last, believing I was the one to blame. But you are right. It is time to stop letting them win. Ethan then pulled her into an embrace, the first he had ever started. Clara felt the faint hum of the silver marks through his coat, but more than that, she felt the warmth of a man finding his way home. Thank you for believing in me, he whispered. Always, she promised. While Ethan kept the ranch going, they hired a lawyer from Austin named James Patterson, known for taking on tough fights. Patterson listened to the whole story without a word. Your wife's research is solid, he said, but the military will fight us tooth and nail to keep this buried. They do not want their experiments seeing the light of day. Can you win? Clara asked plainly. Patterson looked right at her. I can give you a fighting chance. But even if we prove you were a victim, the jury will still see a man with dangerous powers. They could decide you are too much of a risk to walk free. Ethan's voice was tense. What are you saying? I am saying, Patterson replied, we have to prove you control this power, that you are not a danger to anyone. Revealing his marks and what he could do was Ethan's greatest fear. But he looked at Clara and said, I will do it, whatever it takes. Over a quiet Christmas, they prepared. Patterson found Colonel Webb in New Mexico and subpoenaed him. He also found another man willing to testify, Samuel Blackhawk. Samuel had been marked in the same kind of army experiment, and his story would prove Ethan was not the only one. On New Year's Day of 1876, they began the 3-day stagecoach ride to Austin. Clara spent the time helping Ethan prepare. Remember, you are not to blame for being marked, she told him again and again. What if they ask about the doctor I killed, he worried. You tell the truth. You warned him. It was a tragedy, not a murder. Ethan stared out at the passing prairie. But what if a storm hits during the trial? What if I lose control in front of everyone? Clara's voice was calm and steady. Then I will be right there beside you. You know my touch grounds the energy. You will not be alone. You have given me everything, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. You do not have to repay it, she said, taking his hand. We take care of each other. Austin was a busy city, and folks stared. They met Samuel Blackhawk at their hotel 2 days before the trial. He was a quiet man in his 30s, with the same silver marks on his arms. You learn to live with them, Ethan commented. I learned to accept what I cannot change, Samuel replied. There are others like us. We help one another. He looked at Clara. Your wife grounds you? Ethan nodded. She does. The energy just disperses. A small smile touched Samuel's lips. Your wife is rare, but not the only one. My partner can do the same. You see? The marks do not make us monsters, brother. They just make us different. It is what we do with it that counts. That night, Clara could not find any rest. She went to Ethan's room and found him by the window, the silver marks glowing faintly through his shirt. Terrified, he admitted before she could even ask. Tomorrow I have to show everyone what I am. Everything in me wants to run. He turned to face her. "But I am not running." But she saw the grit right underneath that fear. "You are right," she said. "You have run long enough. It is time to face this." Clara reached out, her hand gentle on his rough cheek. He leaned into her touch like a man who had not known kindness in a long time. She whispered, "Whatever happens tomorrow, you are not alone. I will be right there with you." His hand covered hers, pressing it to his face. "I never thought I would have this. Someone who sees me and does not run." Clara's voice was firm. "You deserve someone to stand with you." And then the truth came out, unplanned but honest. "I know this marriage started as a practical deal, Ethan. But somewhere along the way, it became real. I love you." Ethan stared for a long moment, then pulled her into a hug, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "I love you too," he whispered into her hair. "You showed me I was not too broken to fix." They fell asleep right there on the bed, fully clothed, finding a moment of peace before the storm. The next morning, the courthouse was buzzing. It seemed the whole town had come to see the marked cowboy. Clara held Ethan's hand tight as they walked through a crowd of hostile stares and fearful whispers. Inside, District Attorney Charles Reed began, his voice booming. He painted Ethan as a monster who killed his own men with unnatural powers. "My son, Ethan Crow, is not a man," Reed declared. "He is a weapon that went out of control. The question is simple. Can we allow such a weapon to walk free among our families?" Then Patterson stood for the defense. His voice was quiet but steady. "Ethan Crow is not a weapon," he said. "He is a victim of illegal military experiments. The tragedy that took his squad was not murder. It was the uncontrolled reaction of a man in unimaginable pain. The real criminals are the ones who did this to him." The prosecution brought out witnesses who described the strange burn marks on the bodies. They made Ethan sound like a force of nature that needed to be locked away. Ethan took every word like a punch, but he sat tall, his breathing even. The whole courtroom tensed up when Patterson called Colonel Marcus Webb to the stand. Patterson got straight to the point. "Colonel, at Fort Blanco in 1865, were you conducting experiments that involved marking soldiers with silver and electricity?" A murmur went through the crowd. Webb's jaw locked tight. "I invoke my right against self-incrimination," he said. Patterson just smiled. "Your Honor, I would like to submit requisitions from Fort Blanco for surgical tools, silver compounds, and electrical equipment." The real shock came next. Patterson called Dr. Harold Chen, a nervous man who had been granted immunity. Dr. Chen told the jury everything. He spoke of Colonel Webb's secret project to create soldiers who could be used as weapons. Most of the subjects died in the brutal experiments, but a few survived and escaped. "What happened when Sergeant Crow's unit found those escaped men?" Patterson asked. Dr. Chen explained that the desperate escapees captured Ethan. They forcibly marked him right there without any anesthesia, hoping it would expose the entire illegal project. The courtroom was completely silent. "So, to be clear," Patterson said, "Ethan Crow was a victim, marked against his will." Dr. Chen nodded, his voice breaking. "When the marking was finished, his body went into shock. The electrical buildup was uncontrollable. It killed his squad and the 3 men who had marked him. It was all my fault." The prosecution's case fell apart. To finish, Patterson called Samuel Blackhawk, another marked man. "Is Ethan Crow dangerous?" Patterson asked him. Samuel looked at the jury. "We are all dangerous," he said. "Every person has that capacity. The real question is whether we choose control, and Ethan has chosen control. For 10 years he had harmed no one, building an honest life and learning to manage his power. That was the life of a survivor, not a monster." On the stand, Ethan swore his oath and faced the fearful courtroom. Patterson guided him through the story, the ambush, the forced marking, the searing pain, and the loss of control. Ethan took full responsibility for the deaths, but made it clear he had been given no choice. "Do you believe you are dangerous?" Patterson asked. "I carry a dangerous power," Ethan answered carefully, "but I have spent a decade proving I can control it." He then described the one incident when a doctor ignored his warnings during a storm. The man's touch caused an instant fatal discharge. Ethan's voice was heavy with regret, explaining how that terrible accident reinforced his caution. The prosecutor, Reed, tried to portray Ethan as a ticking time bomb, but Ethan's calm honesty held firm. Then Reed made his move. "Mr. Crow, isn't it true you hide beneath that coat because you are ashamed of being a monster?" The courtroom fell silent as Ethan stood. He slowly unbuttoned his heavy coat, then his shirt, revealing the skin beneath. Silver marks covered his chest and arms in beautiful, terrible patterns that pulsed with a soft light. Gasps filled the room. "I am not ashamed," Ethan said, his voice clear and strong. "I am cautious. These marks were forced on me, but they are a part of me now. I choose to live with them responsibly, to protect others from harm. That is the choice of a man, Mr. Reed, not a monster." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, her heart aching with a fierce pride. As the court took a recess, she rushed to help him put his shirt back on. "You were magnificent," she whispered. "I was terrified," he admitted. After 6 long hours, the jury returned. The foreman, a rancher from just outside Austin, stood to deliver their decision. "On the count of desertion, we find the defendant not guilty. On the counts of manslaughter, we find him not guilty by reason of circumstances beyond his control." A wave of relief nearly buckled Clara's knees. But the foreman continued. "However, we recommend Mr. Crow be required to register his condition with the territorial authorities for public safety." The jury wanted him treated like an outcast, but Judge Morrison saw the man, not the monster. She declared Ethan a free man, acquitted of all charges. He would have to register with the territory and get checked on yearly, but there would be no warning signs, no being run out of town. The gavel fell, and just like that, Ethan had his life back. Outside, under the first stars, Ethan held Clara close. "We did it," he said, giving her the credit she deserved. The thunder in the distance did not even make him flinch. For the first time in 10 long years, he felt peace. On the 4-day ride home, they took their time. Clara knew they had to set the story straight, so they stopped in every little town. Folks were wary, but they listened, and the truth began to spread. By the time they reached Redemption, Tom Morrison was waiting. He looked Ethan square in the eye and said what needed to be said. "What they did to you, that is not right." He admitted his own cattle turned up safe and apologized for letting fear guide him. Ethan took his hand, and the whole town saw it. That handshake was the start of something new, a choice to trust instead of fear. Back on their own porch, watching the sun set, Ethan could finally breathe easy. The silver marks on his arms caught the last light. He told Clara that everything felt different, like the land itself had let go of a heavy secret. Then he looked at her with a newfound peace and shared an idea. He wanted to make their ranch a safe place, a sanctuary for others who were hiding just like he had been. Clara's heart swelled. A sanctuary. They talked about how it could work. Samuel Blackhawk could come help build. The settlement money from the government meant to pay for his suffering could be used to build a future for others. "Then we do it," Clara said firmly. "We will turn all that pain into someone else's hope." Ethan pulled her close as they watched the stars come out together. That winter, the work began. Samuel Blackhawk arrived with 3 others who needed a safe harbor. They started building, and soon the place had a name: Haven Ranch. Clara found she had a talent for bringing folks together. A young woman named Marie, who could feel others' pain, learned to use her gift to help. Another man, Thomas Chen, who saw electricity, finally found a purpose for his strange sight. Imagine being born with a power that everyone else sees as a curse. That was Ethan's story, an outcast living in fear of his own touch. But when he met Clara, They decided to build a sanctuary instead of a fortress. This is the story of Haven Ranch, a place where being different is celebrated, not feared. It's about how love can build a community and prove that our greatest perceived weaknesses can become our greatest strengths. By spring, the ranch was a home for people with these special marks. On a warm evening, Clara watched Ethan teach young Jamie, a boy whose hands sparked with emotion. Ethan taught him control, saying, "You're not broken, Jamie. Different doesn't mean wrong. You just have to learn different skills." Watching the fear leave the boy's face, Clara saw the man the world had misunderstood. Their friend Samuel joined her, remarking, "He's good with all of them. He has found his calling." Clara smiled and corrected him gently. "He has found peace. The calling is just a side effect." Samuel agreed. "You saved him from his isolation." Clara replied, "I think we saved each other." Soon, word of Haven Ranch spread. More marked folks arrived, seeking refuge and finding a real community. They built cabins, planted gardens, and started a school. The nearby town of Redemption was slow to accept them, but Clara's steady kindness began to wear down their prejudice. That June, Clara discovered she was pregnant. Overwhelmed with joy and fear, she wondered if their child would inherit Ethan's marks. When she told Ethan, she saw that same conflict on his face. He finally admitted he was terrified. "What if I cannot protect them from what I went through?" he asked. Clara took his hand. "Or what if our child is born into a world where being different is okay? What if they have a father who can teach them how to live with power and grace?" "You make it sound so hopeful," he whispered. "It is hopeful, Ethan. We are building a place where our child can be themselves, marked or not. They will be loved." As the months passed, Ethan's protective nature grew. He carefully built a cradle by hand, sanding the wood until it was perfectly smooth. The other residents rallied around them, offering support. One evening, a man named Thomas, who could sense energies, confirmed their suspicions. "The baby has marks," he said. "Faint, but there. A similar pattern to yours, Ethan." That night in bed, Clara felt a kick. "Did you feel that?" she asked, and Ethan's voice was full of wonder. "Strong little thing," he said. Clara turned to him. "I know you are worried, but I am not afraid. This child will have you as a father. You can teach them that being different is nothing to be ashamed of." "What if I fail?" he asked. "Then we will figure it out together," she promised, "the same way we have figured out everything else." Their son was born on a cold January morning, exactly 2 years after Ethan's name had been cleared. When the baby arrived, the midwife gasped with wonder. "He is a beautiful, healthy boy," she said, "and he has his father's marks." Clara looked down at her son, his tiny arms glowing with faint, silvery patterns. Ethan leaned over them, his expression full of raw emotion. "He is perfect," he whispered. When Clara asked what his name should be, Ethan knew right away. "Samuel," he said, "after the man who showed me I was not alone. Samuel Hope Crow." And hope was exactly what they had built. In the weeks that followed, Clara watched Ethan with their son. The man who was once afraid to touch anyone now cradled his marked child without any fear. His own silver marks glowed softly in perfect harmony with the baby's, a quiet promise of a brighter, more accepting world. During a powerful storm, their little boy Samuel was not scared. He watched the lightning as the silver marks on his skin glowed right along with his daddy's. Clara put her hands on them both, and the power flowed between the three of them, a perfect circle. Clara looked at her husband and son, glowing in the dark, and felt nothing but love. Haven Ranch had become more than a safe place. It had become a beacon. Thomas developed materials to help people understand the science of their abilities. Ethan, no longer a cursed outcast, became a guide for others on the same journey from shame to acceptance. He and Clara built Haven Ranch into a sanctuary. She managed their growing community, raising their son Samuel and acting as a bridge to the outside world. One afternoon, as their 5-year-old son played, Clara and Ethan stood on the porch of their home. Children, both marked and ordinary, played together without fear. Ethan, his own silver marks visible on his forearms, put his arm around her. "Did you ever imagine this?" he asked quietly. "The day you rode up to my cabin, all alone?" "I imagined survival," Clara admitted. "But this family, this purpose, I never dreamed of something so beautiful." "You saved me, Clara," he said. "That night in the storm, you refused to let go. You saved my life, and you saved my soul." "We saved each other," she replied, leaning against him. "And then we learned to help save others." Just then, Samuel ran up to them, his own marks glowing with excitement. "Mama! Papa, look!" A small ball of soft, swirling light formed in his hands. He had been practicing for weeks. "That is wonderful, sweetheart," Clara said, kneeling beside him. "Uncle Thomas says I might help with the lighting system soon," the boy said with pride. "Keep practicing," Ethan said, ruffling his son's hair. "Control first." "He will be more powerful than I ever was," Ethan said as they watched him run back to his friends. "And he will be wise," Clara added, "because he is growing up knowing he never has to hide." That evening, the entire community, 47 people, gathered for their weekly meal. Marked and unmarked families sat together sharing food and their lives. At the head of the table sat Ethan and Clara, with Samuel between them, a family no longer defined by a curse, but by their courage. Tom Morrison had brought news from town that afternoon. The territorial government wanted to use Haven Ranch as a model for how to live peacefully with marked individuals. "You are changing the world," Tom had said, "showing people that different does not have to mean dangerous." Later that night, Clara and Ethan walked hand in hand through the quiet settlement, looking down at the lights of the community they had built. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked softly. "Marrying a man you did not know? Taking on all of this?" Clara squared up to him, taking both his hands. In the dark, the silver marks on his arms glowed, pulsing in time with her own heart. "Not for a single second," she said, her voice steady and sure. "You gave me a home when I had nothing. How could I ever feel regret?" He pulled her close under that wide open sky. The very marks that had once pushed everyone away now bound them to a family. What he called a curse had become a gift, transformed by plain, old-fashioned love and acceptance. The man they once called the cursed cowboy was now a husband, a father, a leader. He had become all this because Clara was the woman who saw past the scars to the man underneath. Together, they had built more than a ranch. They had built a legacy. As a gentle rain began to fall, washing over the land like a blessing, Ethan Crow finally let himself believe it. He was not a monster. He was a man who had survived the unthinkable and built something beautiful from the ashes. She knew the real miracle wasn't the strange power he held, but the simple truth that love could change anything. Every storm passes, and in the morning, Haven Ranch would wake up to another day. It was another chance to prove that being different never means being less. It showed that sometimes the folks nobody dares to touch just need one person brave enough to reach out a hand. 2 years ago, Clara had reached out her hand, and in return she found her whole world. This was the story she would tell their grandchildren someday. Not a fairy tale, but a true story about two broken people who discovered they fit together perfectly, marks and all. As the morning sun lit up the horizon in silver and gold, the same colors as the patterns on her husband's skin, she smiled. Clara knew for certain she had made the only choice that mattered. She chose love, and in the end, love had chosen her right back. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.